Hey guys, Eugene here again, back with part 2 of our build log for Nostromo. If you missed part 1, you can find a link to it up here, and I urge you to go back and take a look and review, make sure that you are all caught up. By the way, thank you so much for your views, your comments, and feedback on that first part of the build log. It really motivates me to make more videos, to produce more content, and stay engaged. So I do ask you to provide feedback as the build log moves forward and to keep letting me know what I can do better and what you've been liking so far. What do solving a Rubik's Cube, learning Klingon, and memorizing the blood code for Mortal Kombat on Sega Genesis have in common? Well, these are all nerd feats, heroic deeds along the path of ascension to the pantheon of geekdom. And water cooling your PC is certainly among those. And today, we're going to take another step along that journey with Nostromo, specifically by putting water blocks on all of the main hardware components. Let's get started. Before putting on the water blocks, I wanted to change up the overdone red and black color scheme to make this fit a little bit better with my other components and the theme in general. And in order to do that, I had to get out my tools. And that includes X-Acto knives, black acrylic paint and brushes, tons of duct tape, and also some Sculpin IPA. Now, before we get into the painting process, a caveat. What you'll see in this video is not for the faint of heart. Painting your motherboard and, in most cases, replacing stock cooling parts with water blocks will void your warranty and may leave you with some very broken, very expensive hardware and no method of recourse. So don't say I didn't warn you. On to the painting. The idea here is to mask off the motherboard PCB and everything you don't want to paint, while leaving the parts that you do want to paint exposed. Pretty simple. Nevertheless, you may notice that my buddy here is much better at it than I am. Once you've masked everything off, you can begin applying the paint. I've chosen to use brushes for the control that they afford, but other methods I've seen out there include spray paint and Plastidip. As for me, the brush seemed best because it allowed me to avoid getting any paint in the PCI slots and the RAM DIMMs, which is a definite no-no. I also got some cheap RAM and PCI devices to stick in the slots as I paint them to make extra sure that nothing gets in. Well, having painted the motherboard, I let it dry for a couple hours, and I really am happy with the results. I'll let you guys make up your minds for yourselves, but I think that this is going to be a great look that fits in well with the other components and the overall theme of the build. I also like the texture provided by the acrylic paint. Gives it a little bit more of a dynamic look and contrasts with the flat finish of the stock black parts on the motherboard. Well, with that done, I decided to move on to the water blocks, and I started with the graphics cards. For that, you first remove the screws connecting the backplate. There's some screws under there that you'll want to take out as well. Then afterwards, you carefully pull off the stock cooling solution, making sure to detach the wire that connects the fans. It'll adhere a little bit because of the thermal interface. Now you do have to remove that thermal material first, so I used Art2Clean for that. You leave the first batch on a little bit, they move on to something else, then put the second one on, rub it in, and it'll give you a nice mirror finish. And then you apply the stock thermal pads supplied with the water block to the VRMs and the MOSFETs on the graphics card. Do the same for the backplate. And voila. Now next, put on the EKFC bridge, which will allow you to connect that to the SLI bridge that comes from EK as well. Just repeat the process 2 more times, and there you go. Now we move on to installing the Monoblock for the ASUS Rampage 5 board. And that includes the MOSFET and VRM coolers, as well as the CPU cooler. Now be very careful here. Anytime you're dealing with the CPU socket, you have the ability to do a lot of damage without even noticing it. So first you unscrew some of the retention brackets in the back, and then apply thermal interface to both the X99 chipset and the CPU itself. Then apply the included thermal pads to the areas specified in the manual, and put on this big honkin' thing, which is the Monoblock itself. Once you apply that, you turn it over and add on the retention pieces that come along with the Monoblock. I also wanted to reinstall the I/O port cover, and much to my dismay, the heat pipe that comes off of it broke off very easily. So installing that back on was more simple than I thought, although it was a little disconcerting. And that's it. I think it looks pretty awesome. I've never used a Monoblock before, and I'm excited to see how it performs as compared to just a regular CPU cooler. I've also never cooled my motherboard components either, so I'm excited to see the performance that I get from that. In terms of aesthetics though, I think it's pretty great. The final component to which we'll be applying Waterblocks is the RAM. And to begin, use a heat gun and point it at the RAM to heat up the adhesive material that's connecting the chips to the heat spreader. Now, I can't guarantee that this will work for the type of RAM that you're using in your system, but for the G.skill Ripjaws, it definitely does. I definitely advise caution here, as being a little too forceful with the heat spreader is going to leave you ripping off one of the chips and basically having to throw away your RAM. Once you've removed the heat spreader, you'll want to clear off the thermal material and the adhesive gunk that is left on the chips. And again, we're using ArtiClean for that. And once you clear all of that off, you will apply thermal pads again. This should be pretty familiar to you. And these come with the EK Monarch heat spreaders. I've skipped ahead here to get to the point where I'm putting in my second DIMM. And that's because I want to show you how important it is to line up each one with the previous one. So here you can see I go to some painstaking lengths to make sure that they're perfectly lined up. And why you do that becomes obvious when you put on the Waterblock. So here you can see why it's so important to line up the RAM sticks as you put them into the Monarch heat spreaders. That's because when you stick them in the slots, you got to make sure that the holes on the heat spreaders line up, because that's where you'll be screwing in the EK water block. And there it is, all done. I think it looks pretty great. I'm really excited to see the cooling that I'll be getting with this system. But until then, I am just excited to look at it. I mean, it really looks awesome. So there you have it. The water blocks are on and the heart of the system is just about ready to get something flowing through it. That's what we'll do next time on Eugene Tries. For now, if you don't like this video, please tell me why. If you do, you know where the like, subscribe, and favorite buttons are. Go ahead and hit those for me. Cheers. Forgot one more thing. So while I've been working on this, Samsung decided to go out and release their 950 Pro SSD. This is the fastest consumer SSD in the M.2 format available, and we'll be putting that in the Nostromo as well. You can look forward to that next time. All right, catch you later.